you would give me permission to, or have any objections to me sending a thank you to Chief Ron Haddad, and maybe the city attorney can weigh in on it, because I don't want to send out a letter that isn't appropriate, but he had given us advice, and given me personally some advice in the process of our hiring of the new chief of police here, and he met with me when I was down there and gave me a baseball cap, and I guess I would like to just send him a letter thanking him for his help, and something that would have the City of Ironwood letterhead on it, a formal thank you from the city. If you have an objection to that, I won't do it, but if you don't, no one has an objection to it, is that acceptable?
I think so. Sounds
It'd be just a thank you for your time and help on that. You can review it if you like before I send it.
It was very beneficial. It's a good insight to have me looking forward, going forward with filling the position.
And he's extended his business cards to the city staff if there's any other questions or thoughts that you might have about the future. And also suggested that if you were interested in any capacity to contact him for any advice or suggestions, he would be open to that. So I'll get a card to you from him also. Okay, that's my only item R, citizens wishing to address the commission on items not on the agenda. Any items tonight?
Talk a little bit about grass in the city. What I don't really want to talk about tonight is the hypocrisy of complaining about grass when the road in front of someone's house is dissolving. I really don't want to talk about the fact that the house across the street from me wanted to demolish last year because no city employee checked the quality of the job that was done. At least half of that property is incapable of being mowed by a lawnmower, and yet that woman was sent a blight notice. I really don't want to talk about the fact that so much city property is in absolute disgraceful condition. I don't want to really talk about certain complaints that are repeatedly ignored, such as the tires and the smashed TV on Trail 2 months. I don't even really want to talk about the fact that the ordinance, while it gives the option to notify the agent of the owner of the property, city management here found it more expedient to send a letter to France to let somebody know. What I do want to talk about is the actual blight ordinance, and specifically grass and noxious weeds. Section 1746, that's fine, that's the definition for now, I won't object to anything in there. Section 1747, notice to cut. The city manager, or his or her designee, is authorized to notify the owner of any parcel of land or the agent of the owner to cut, destroy, or remove the material and vegetation referred to in this article, and to keep it cut, destroyed, or removed. Such notice shall be given by publishing the notice in a newspaper circulating in the city, and by such other method as may be directed by the city commission. Now, it's my understanding that we never do that. We never publish the notice in the newspaper. Now, the excuse I heard is they put one in at the beginning of the season, a general notice. That is not what this ordinance says. The question is, why aren't we doing that? What remedy are we going to take to the fact that now work done at owner's expense, if at any time during the period commencing 10 days after the publication of the notice given pursuant to this article, after 10 days giving that notice, that's when we can go in, trespass on someone's property, mow their grass, and then charge them an exorbitant fee. And if they don't pay that fee, we then put that as a lien against their property. My question is, if the city does not follow their own ordinance, what crimes are they guilty of committing? That's my question, I
Okay,
guess.
that's your question. I don't know, Scott, do you have a thought on that procedure? Is it,
If you touch a little bit on it, I mean, the city's goal is not to cut grass. We really don't want to do that, but there are cases where homeowner doesn't necessarily, cut their grass, and it's been considered, a blight type of situation if it gets to a certain length. So then we have a process, as Steve had indicated, where we go out and ultimately have to cut some people's grass if they haven't cut it. Procedurally, like I say, what we've done is provided a general notice at the start of the blight season, basically, the grass season, saying, city has this ordinance, you need to cut your grass, if not, these steps could take place. Again, we can review our ordinance, always looking to try to make it better, improve on it, make it streamlined. I guess with grass, there's kind of a timing issue, because grass is getting long next to someone's residence. Usually that neighborhood wants it cut fairly expeditiously, so we try to, implement a process that's a little quicker than going through a blighted structure where you actually have to go in and remove a house or what have you. So again, we're always open to suggestions if there's a way to do it more effectively. We're always open to looking at that. That's the process we've used in the past. Right now, we're in between an overall notice, and then we give the property owner a notice that they need to cut their grass, otherwise the city will be there in so many days and have to cut it.
so in that notice to cut, in that description, there such notice shall be given by publishing the notice in the newspaper and circulated or by any such, that's for a second notice? That's a grant notice?
There's basically an initial notice we put in the paper, and we'll check with legal counsel to make sure that that's, implementing that correctly. And if we're not, make whatever changes you need. But essentially the idea was there's one notice put in the paper at the start of the season saying that, if you get to a point where your grass needs to be cut, there's a process and ordinance in place that gets followed. And then there's a notice if there is a specific instance, during the grass growing season where someone's grass is high, they get a notice that they need to cut their grass so many days to cut it. Otherwise, the city will come in and cut it for them. And then we bill them for that service. So I guess if there's a procedural thing, we can review with the city attorney if there's a better way to do it or something that crosses the T's better and dots the I's.
Maybe just that notice to cut section is a little unclear. I'm not sure I can follow it myself as to how the notices are. Maybe we can clarify that notice given by publishing in the newspaper could be. That's kind of.
My question is that what the ordinance says, or is it not what it says? Now, this isn't something from 1926, and we're digging up stuff. This was passed in 2007. We have the current city attorney, was the city attorney when this was passed, the same city manager. Now, either this is what the ordinance says, what would stand up in court? If somebody came back and
make a final, Mr. Frank, you can bring an action and have the judge make a decision.
Which also brings up another thing. I asked our code enforcement officer, how would someone contest a notice? And he said, what? And after I explained the definition of that word, again, he said, well, once it ends up on your taxes, I guess you could fight that out in court. So there's no policy in place if you think that you've gotten this in error, if you think you're being harassed. I asked him, how long? He says the average length of grass. I said, what is the average length of my grass? Well, it must be over 8 inches. He said, well, how do you know? Well, it must be. But would this, and a citizen should not have to risk going to court to understand what one of the city ordinances means. And if an average person cannot read this and understand it, then it's written extraordinarily poorly. And again, this was done 4 years ago with the current city manager and the current attorney.
Thanks, Steve, for your comment. Maybe we could take a look at this and discuss that maybe if the wording is clear, and if you guys maybe have a different recommendation for it, or
sure, we can take a look at it if there's a way to make it clear that's beneficial to everybody.
okay, and maybe give us your thoughts at the next meeting. Okay, that would be great. Any other?
Yes. I was glad to see that you corrected a 30-year-old mistake. How long will it take to do something about the illegal blight committee? It's a standing committee of the city commission. It's not the,
Maybe since we're on that blight notice, you guys could determine whether a blight committee is...
We'll bring that back at the next meeting too. We can do that. Jim's done a lot of research on it, which has been helpful to recreate the history.
I might add, no thanks to my FOIA request, because according to that, there were no documents available that I happened to find right from city documents myself. So I think that's something that has to be looked at also.
We'll get some thoughts on that at the next meeting. Anything else? Anybody else have a comment? Hearing none, I guess we move to adjourn. Further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor? Everything else is